Black Dahlia murder is one of the most famous and gruesome unsolved cases in America.
One family, though, is pretty sure they know who did it, and they're willing to expose decades of family trauma to get to the truth.
We're doing a recap of Root of Evil on this episode of So Much Crime,
So Little Time. Hey, Dee, I was waiting for something to come in the mail today. And you know what?
What?
It took forever. I had ordered something and I was just waiting for days and days for it to come. And I thought, if only there was a better way to get things that you really, really want quickly. And then I realized patreon.com is that. Patreon.com/SoMuchCrime, So Little Time. Because I had ordered some outtakes from one of my favorite podcasts, other than this one, like my second and third favorite podcast. And they were being sent on like a floppy disk. Yes. On a floppy disk. And it took weeks.
Why did we both go there? That's hilarious.
I don't know. It took 4 to 6 weeks to arrive. But then when I went to patreon.com/SoMuchCrime, So Little Time, I got bonus clips. I got extra bits from the time machine. I got outtakes.
Immediately.
As soon as I went and registered on the site. So the other cool thing is I went there as the host of the show and was able to join an online chat with the host of the show, which is me.
So you joined a chat with yourself?
It was pretty enlightening. I learned a lot about myself. You were there too, which was pretty cool. But the part where I got to talk to myself was the best. And you know what else? Some people may have seen some of our social media where we're wearing shirts from the show. Those are now available on patreon.com. So go over to patreon.com/SoMuchCrime, So Little Time. Support the show. Get some fun stuff. Don't have to wait for the mail. It's right there, right away. No floppy disks.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff. And before we start, just a quick warning.
Warning. Well, actually, just warning in general. I don't even need to sing a warning for this one. I'm just like, fuck it. This is a big warning for spoilers and also like everything.
Yeah, there's a content warning here as well. So this episode will have
Not
spoilers.
for our content. We won't be graphic about the content.
But the content at the root in Root of Evil deserves a content warning. Anyway.
Yeah.
Also, spoilers. We're going to talk about Root of Evil. We're going to discuss the whole series here.
If you haven't listened yet, check out our preview episode on this show. It's the one before this one in your feed. If you don't like gruesome details, you may want to we don't do this usually. I haven't even discussed this with Jeff. You may actually want to listen to our recap first and hear our thoughts about the podcast. As a whole, there are certain episodes that we might recommend and certain episodes that we might say, if the gruesome is not for you, just don't listen to them. That is one thing I would say in the intro here that I have never said in the last 143 episodes.
Yeah. Anyway, we will put a link to Root of Evil in our show notes. Listen at your own discretion.
All right. So let's give us a little reminder of what Root of Evil, the podcast, is all about. So it was released in 2019 and the hosts are sisters Rasha and Yvette. There are 8 episodes, about 40 minutes each, with one going just over the hour mark. But what is the story, Jeff? I feel like you're taking one for the team here in giving this overview. I appreciate it, but let's just focus in on episode 1. What did we hear about?
Yeah, so in episode 1, which we discussed in our preview, we heard from Rasha and Yvette, these sisters, and they were investigating the life story of their mother, whose name is Hodel. And so Fauna was born to a 15-year-old named Tamar. When Fauna was born, Tamar put her up for adoption. Fauna would go on to become a mother herself of, I think Yvette was the older one, when Fauna was 15. And this was after she had survived a pretty abusive childhood home. So a little bit later on, Fauna, reconnects with her birth mother, Tamar. And episode 1 ended with Fauna learning a lot of things about her family history, specifically the most notable, that her grandfather, so Yvette and Rasha's great-grandfather, George Hodel, may have been the murderer of Elizabeth Short, who is more famously known as the Black Dahlia. This was the murder from 1947 in Los Angeles, California. How was that?
That was really good. Yeah. Good hustle. Okay. Now to talk about everything else.
There's so much else to talk about and so many things we probably don't want to talk about. But when I picked this podcast to listen to, I picked it because I knew of this case. I did not really know in significant detail either about Elizabeth Short or about the Hodel family. I'd never heard of the Hodel family. That's how kind of ignorant I was of this whole case. And I thought, well, this is a very famous true crime case from American history. And this is a very highly regarded podcast about it. And it seems like it has that personal connection to it. And I think what really impressed me about this podcast was that it really was at its core about this family. Like, I was thinking about The Clearing, where it was a woman who was going down this path investigating her father, who was a serial killer. And I think when we talked about that, which was maybe in like January of 2025 when we did that one stuck out to me just because it found a way to really focus on the people that were affected, to not be, I don't think that was, my recollection is, it wasn't super sensationalistic about the murderer. And I think this one did a version of that too, where George Hodel was very much at the center of this, but there was a lot of space given to the various family members understanding their traumas, their respective traumas. There were traumas relative to each other within the family, as well as tying it back to the father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and how, yes, he's at the center of this, but they had to grapple with things that their own mother did, or that the way that their siblings treated each other, or it was a combination of compounding traumas. But the fact that the family was always sort of at the center of this, never more so than at the end. I think the last episode, how you end a story like this, I think says a lot about what you're trying to do. And I thought the last episode was incredibly powerful and unusual, especially in contrast to all that came before it in all the episodes before it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like one of the big things that I kept hearing throughout was George wanted to drive wedges between the different family members. You know, if Tamar told her mother that dad sexually abused me, the mother would say it and George would say, oh, she actually said that to me about you the other day. And she's like, oh. So like all of a sudden there's a wedge. All of a sudden there's a liar. And nobody trusts anyone. So now Tamar doesn't trust her mum. The mum doesn't trust Tamar. Tamar. Do you know what happened? Tamar.
Yeah.
I started watching Real Housewives of Orange County this week. And there's a woman in it called Tamra. Tamra, Jeff. Tamra. Just or-A, not A-or. And
well,
I'm like...
And different people pronounced her name differently in this podcast.
They did. I thought so too. And I thought I was being driven. Anyway, so the wedge has been driven. And then I feel like all the children, like all the siblings are talking about it. Everyone's talking about like the wedges and, you know, oh, I'll talk to you about him and then I'll talk to her about her. And then everyone won't be trustworthy so that no one trusts anyone so I can do whatever I want. Like that seemed to be the entire play that was playing through these generations. And I thought the most powerful thing for me was at one point when they spoke about George dying, they said he won. And they were like, he didn't because now he's dead and, you know, he's evil and we know he's evil or whatever. And I was like, no, you guys won because he was a sadistic prick.
Yeah.
An evil sadistic prick. And I want to talk about Tamar kind of separately, but also not like a sadistic to her children, narcissistic, uncaring, kind of evil in the ways that she treated her children. And I'm aware that's layered because we know what she endured as a child. So I want to come back to that. I'm going to put a pin in that for now. I want to just look at her as a mother for a moment. I do want to come back to that. And yet, it seems, it appears from that last episode and what we hear throughout that they have broken the cycle because they are all coming together.
Yeah.
So they haven't driven a wedge. So they've the exact opposite of what was tried has happened because they're all together. They're all open. They're saying their feelings and being okay with the discomfort and they're moving through it, or so it appears. And I think that's a beautiful thing because at the end of the day, they are the ones that are winning.
I mean, this is, in a way, the darkest of dark stories in that, like, we're not just talking about murder. We're talking about, crimes against children. We're talking about incest. We're talking about
multi-generational incest. You're like against your daughter, against your granddaughter, against like loaning out your daughter for a weekend to
basically
men
like forced
and women,
prostitution,
like,
child trafficking. And this is a
the
child
worst
trafficking story.
It's not just one of any of them. It's all of the worst of it.
Yeah.
Together.
But you're right. Like, in the end, these folks came together. And not just that they did it, that they worked on themselves. They recognized what was happening to them. They recognized how those wedges were being driven between them. But the fact that so many of them were willing to come to get in a room together and sit around and talk about it and open up about what they went through, how they treated each other, and what the root causes were. I mean, I think, and we should talk about Tamar because she's in our preview. I think we didn't quite know what to make of her yet. We didn't.
I think I called her out and said I might regret it because I said, I think I had said like she seemed to be so nonchalant about it all. Even her like response to like the airport thing was so like whatever.
Right. Yeah. Like how reliable of a narrator is she?
A narrator. Yeah. Look at you having a memory.
But now, how do you feel about her?
I think it's hard. It's extremely hard to say because you wonder, and people often talk about the generational, like the impact of like abuse, like on the generations. And you saw that on George and Tamar and her children. And it seems like the children have broken it. So do we judge Tamar for not have broken it? Or is it like, well, maybe the kids had more like knowledge, maybe there's more acceptance, maybe there was more speak about it then as it was when Tamar was growing up. Like, it's so hard. And I don't think you can like compare at all. Do you know what I mean? Because
No,
I
I
know
do.
at one point one of the kids was like, if I had a child, that is not how I would. And like if I was her and I had gone through that, that is not how I would have raised my daughter or my children. But in saying that, and I get that on each of them, I think that was the beautiful thing. Each of them had a different perspective, and sometimes a really different perspective. Like, some were like, I love my mother, and some were like, I don't give a shit if she curls up in a ball and dies. And like there was such a variety of like feelings towards the whole situation, and it was all fairly accepted, which was quite nice. I don't know.
But
I don't know. I just can't. I can't fathom, Jeff, how. Do you know the one that got me?
what?
I mean, not the one that got me. So much of it got me. But I feel like the one that might stick with me is when Fauna to Elizabeth. So Tamar had her first child who gave her up for adoption. That's Fauna, who we met in episode 1. She had a second child who she named Elizabeth.
Deborah Elizabeth.
And she started to call herself Fauna, as she said herself, because it was a way to try and make her mother love her more.
Yeah.
Which, yeah. But
That's
in that episode, when she mentioned that, she mentioned ringing her mum and being like, I keep having this nightmare about having like sore eyes and like something's in my mouth and like it feels like weird and it's this weird, and then I wake up. And her mum's like, oh yeah, when you were like, I can't remember the details now, but 5, 9 and 11, you had eye surgery, and basically I tried to comfort you, and this is how I comforted you. And I heard it and I paused it and I was like, and obviously I had to take a breath and be like, this woman was broken. She was never given a chance, Jeff. She was never given a chance as a mother, ever. And there is no but, because I've no concept of this. It's just hard to imagine that you having gone, if you had gone through abuse, you wouldn't realize that is not what I want for my children. It's hard to imagine that. But
yeah.
I can't say that. I don't know. But
But I mean, this is not an excuse. I mean, one of her children saying this woman should not have had children. To say that about your mother was both very true and so incredibly heartbreaking. But yeah, I mean, from when she was a very little girl, I mean, what basis would she have to know how to be a mother, to how to act? Like
it wasn't even, yeah. It's weird.
I mean,
this week while listening to this podcast, in my mind, I've started to be like, it's not even that this happened. And I'm like, oh my God, I now have a level in my head of like this. I don't want this level. This level needs to fuck right off. I don't, there is no level. It's horrendous. Like the abuse that Tamar endured was unimaginable. And that so many people and her siblings, but so many people are complicit, like so many grown-ups.
Yeah.
So many people who know, apparently a DA was paid off. Apparently jurors are paid off.
The jurors in the incest trial, it seems like the LAPD was potentially paid off. It seems like you're right. So many adults.
They booked them house and they heard him say all these things. They potentially heard a woman be murdered, but
murdered and buried.
There? And nobody did anything? No.
And they just buried the investigation. Yeah.
Because he was a VD doctor? I'm just like, I meant to look up what VD was. It's like some sort of like STD?
Venereal disease. It's the broad category for all STDs. Yeah.
Oh, it's just like an STD.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And the fact that he's such a prick, the way he sometimes said to people that they had an STD and they didn't.
Oh, we talk about monsters on the show.
No, I know.
This is another level of monster that is hard to fully comprehend. And I thought, and I was saying earlier about how I thought the show didn't spend too much time talking about it. But when they did talk about it, when they gave his sort of life story about how he was, as a child, he was put in positions in situations that he certainly didn't seem emotionally ready to handle, right? Like he went to Caltech at 15, gets a professor's wife pregnant. Like, how do you end up in that situation? A 15-year-old, so many 15-year-olds and people having babies, but he clearly was intellectually smart, right? Like high IQ, but yeah, who was watching him? Who was guiding him? Who was parenting him that he ended up this way? Because he became that head of VD for was it for the police or for the military or whatever it was, but at a pretty young age.
Mm.
And then, yeah, like you said, he turned around and abused that privilege. Murdered his secretary, possibly, because she was going to expose him. Got away with that because he had all this control. He had all this, and it seems like and they don't really feel like connect all these dots, but it seems like he just had power that begat more power, and he sort of consolidated it.
Well, as soon as he got in the, what was it, the head of LA County VD or something, so he had access to or maybe Hollywood or whatever, he had access to everybody's records. So he's able to see.
Yeah.
And at that time, if you got outed for having an affair, I presume, I know in Ireland, it would have blown up your future. I don't know if it was the same here.
I don't know. But you're right. Like that the thing that I kept thinking about was how many adults were present when Tamar was a child. These artists, like Man Ray and these people that I've heard of, that are famous artists, and this stuff was going on, and it's
giving Epstein, Jeff.
Yes, I think that's a very apt comparison.
That's what I was. Episode 3 notes are Tamar. Wow, JFC in capitals. Jesus fucking Christ. And then the last line, it's giving Epstein. They are my notes for episode 3 because I didn't want to write down anything else. And
That's true.
that's a content warning, because I would say episode 3 is one that obviously it gives context on what Tamar had to endure. But let's just trust me. It was fucking horrific. Like, think of the worst things imaginable and think of it being the father of someone who does it to them and puts them in that position. And that's what happened. And that is episode 3.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the court case, because she gets pregnant and he makes her go for an illegal abortion. And apparently she gets an infection and has to...
No, every story gets worse and worse the more detail we get. She gets like raped by the abortion doctor, I think.
Someone was taking care of her because of the infection, then rapes her. And then the dad's really annoyed because someone else touched her. Which,
to your point about, so episode 2 was the one about Elizabeth Short and about what happened to her. I remember telling some people after we listened to episode 1 about what we heard in episode 1 and how it was kind of odd that in episode 1 there was nothing really directly about Elizabeth Short. We didn't hear about that crime. There was also no violence in episode 1.
I know. I was like, okay.
And then episode 2 comes in real hard.
Episode 2, the start of it was, it was vile. It was vile. It was unnecessary. The detail was unnecessary. It was nobody needs to know that detail. I thought it was salacious, and it's gone for an audience that nobody needs to know that.
Why do you think they chose to do that?
I'm not sure. I know. Do you know what I really would love to know? Part of me thinks the whole point is to highlight the sadistic nature, and maybe when you've society so blind to, or so like they've gone kind of nose blind to the violent crimes that are happening. And if you say someone got murdered or someone got raped, people are like, oh yeah, like, because shit happens, and you're like, no, it's not really shit that's happening. It's like people are being murdered and raped or whatever. It's not enough, and so people need more and more detail, and the more and more detail you give people, the more and more they need in order for it to be emphasized. It's like on a page, if you highlight everything,
doesn't mean
can't see anything.
Yeah,
and so I feel like maybe that was it, but just it for me, I was like, I love true crime, and this was too much.
So I agree, but I also have a slightly different theory that's a little overlaps with your theory. I think the thing about doing that in episode 2, so episode 1 is about Fauna and Tamar and kind of a little bit about their stories and finding each other. Then episode 2 is about Elizabeth Short. And that's really the one episode that is like deep into that story and what happened to her, and specifically the crime itself. Why I think that was important, why I think it was there, is those are objective facts about what happened to her. Those are things we know with certainty. Whereas everything that follows about Tamar, about the incest, about all of the abuse and rape and all of that, none of that is kind of hard evidence. But I think because you heard what you heard in episode 2, you realize that the person who did this, supposing you believe that George Hodel did this, is capable of being a monster. Like that, it sort of like grounds him at a level of awfulness that otherwise I feel like you could potentially say, oh, these people are being hyperbolic, they are exaggerating, they are misremembering. But the Elizabeth Short case, in that such graphic detail, is inarguable, right? Like it's inarguable that these things happened to her, that she was tortured and mutilated in these ways that we heard about. And I think with that as sort of in the background now, going into episode 3 and 4 and 5, I feel like you're more likely to say, oh, this is in this person's realm of possibilities of what he's capable of. The type of person who could do this to Elizabeth Short could also do this to his own 15-year-old daughter.
Yeah, maybe.
Just from like a storytelling point of view.
I think that's a really good point.
It's still
I think
really
it's a really
hard
good
to listen
point.
to.
I think, and that's like, I think this would be definitely a podcast I'd love to speak to the hosts. I'd love to speak to the producers of it to get that insight, to see, like, was that part of the plan? Is it like, I want to embed this here so that I can, or so that it shows?
Can we talk about the hosts, Rasha and Yvette, for a second? Because I had a note on them that I was curious. So first of all, they seem remarkably well adjusted considering what we heard about the rest of their family kind of going through. But I think more than that, every time they popped in throughout the whole podcast, they seemed to bring such sort of like joy and positive energy that to me sort of counterbalanced how awful, like they could have, there are hosts of true crime podcasts who are very dry, very serious, very somber. Rasha and Yvette are not. They're fun. They come across as fun. And that was to me the sort of like a lifeline that kind of kept this bearable, was when they popped in. It's like, oh yeah, these two, like in a way it's like it works out okay because look what happens a couple generations later. These two seemingly wonderful people come about and are both positive in their sort of affect, but also willing to dive into this horrible family history. To me, they came across, and again, this is so biased by this is the story we have in front of us, but they seem like amazing people that, yeah, I would love to talk to them.
Oh, no, totally. Oh, no, I thought they did a fantastic job. And like having that balance with everything that this podcast brings and that this entire story brings it's not easy to do. It can't be easy to do.
No,
and I feel like there would be so many podcasts that would try and do it, and it would come across insensitive nearly. And I don't know whether it's because they are family members that there was this additional sensitivity. Yeah. I don't know, but there was never a time I felt like, because there were sometimes I forgot they were family members.
Oh, that's
because at some points I was judging the podcast on the level of detail it went into.
Yeah.
And then I had to remind myself, and purely the detail. So, because the level of detail, if I'm really honest, made me really uncomfortable. The level of detail about the abuse. Now, look, majority of people who listen to true crime are not going to be saying that child abuse type of true crime podcasts is like up there with their like favorite, subgenre, presumably.
Hopefully not.
I know I'm not alone in that, but as the queen of my family would say, who owns the problem? The problem belongs to me because I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm uncomfortable because I should be fucking uncomfortable about it, because this is an uncomfortable topic. And if we shy away from telling and hearing uncomfortable topics, that is how they breed. That is how they continue to exist if we don't shine a light on them. And so I had to keep reminding myself that it wasn't a third party or a journalist telling this story.
Yeah.
And if it was, I would have very strong feelings about the way they handled it. But it was the victims, and it was the victims' family. And they decided to go into the level of detail they decided to go into. And I found it too much. I'm not the audience for every single episode in this podcast, and I will say that right now. If I was producing this podcast, I would have produced it differently. I would have structured it differently to make it more accessible to a wider audience, with additional episodes going into detail with content warnings on the graphic nature of them. That is how I would have done it. But I had to continuously remind myself that this is not for me. This is not for George. This is for the family. And that cathartic episode that we hear at the very end, where they're all coming together in a big fuck you to George Hodel and a big F you to Tamar, being like, you couldn't split us apart. And maybe a less big F you to Tamar was more of a like, we know you were broken.
Yeah.
Coming into motherhood. but you also broke us, but we are not broken as a unit. We are still together. And we have won. We have beaten it. The generational trauma stops here.
I think
and
that's
I feel
right.
like that's the way it should have been played as opposed to this.
I also think, yeah, we've talked about so many times in the past hosts that were too flippant or too jokey for very serious issues. And I think this wasn't a flippancy. I think this was something else. I think this was, I also think it matters that these were two sisters talking about their mother and their grandmother primarily. Like the main focus of the story was about these women in this family. And I think if the genders were different, certainly if they weren't family members, like if they weren't talking about their mother and their grandmother, that would have changed things dramatically. Like, yeah, if this had been a neutral, like, journalist hosting this, first of all, that would have been real tricky, I think, to handle it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
But I don't know. I thought they did a fantastic job considering the subject matter of what they were dealing with. Like, I can't even imagine having to call up your uncles, your great uncles, and just wade through this volume of material that is so upsetting and so personal, and think about putting this out into the world.
And not even going through the material, but even just starting the conversation.
Yeah.
And asking these family members to say, like, will you talk about, hopefully, the worst thing that happened in your life? Because I hope that everything that happened after for each and every one of them was beautiful and fabulous and not at all slightly close to the darkness that we're hearing here.
That's
that can't be easy. That can't have been easy to ask. It absolutely couldn't have been easy to hear. And I can't imagine saying yes to it.
Yeah, and that's why I think it was so, like, it was intense listening to that last episode of this group sitting in a room together. But the other thing that was particularly intense was in the episode before that, in episode 7, where we heard that telephone call between Fauna and Tamar. And there was a long clip of a call, and there was a lot of sort of primary source audio like this that I thought was fascinating. But that one in particular stood out to me, of hearing these two women who have such a fraught history, such a terrible history, and in kind of that unguarded way of listening in on someone's telephone conversation. That was a remarkable piece of audio, and it was also uncomfortable to listen to, right? Like it's.
Well, you really felt like you were listening in to someone's conversation. You shouldn't be there. That's like what I felt anyway. Intensely
private conversation. And then that episode. So episode 7, I think it ends or late in that episode is when Fauna gets cancer and passes away, and that hit her so hard because it was so sudden. I don't know. It seemed like she had done so much. She has a book. Do you know that?
Fauna does?
She does, yeah. It's called One Day She'll Darken. We talked in the preview episode about her thinking that she was biracial when she was younger. And so it's the subtitle is The Mysterious Beginnings of Fauna Hodel. It's a memoir. It's actually classified as memoir and true crime, according to the internets. It came out in 2008, and it's about her life. It's also about her mother and George Hodel. So it gets into the Black Dahlia case. And then we also touched on this in the preview, but I want to just mention in case people missed that, this podcast was kind of closely tied to a TV series that Chris Pine was the star of, called I Am the Night, which was, I think, a lightly fictionalized version of this story. I would be tempted, but I would probably need a while before I get to it to read Fauna's book. What do you think? Would you ever come back to the story? Or are you done with the story?
Maybe I'd read Fauna's book. Yeah, I might read Fauna's book. I would. I need some time. And I know that says a lot about me, and I'm okay with that. We can't all be perfect. But I might do that. Go on.
How we often end these, well, sometimes with reviews and sometimes with talking about, would you recommend this? Do we have any reviews?
I have reviews.
Should we get to that?
I have a good few reviews. So I have a review that was started on Reddit. Root of Evil is highly fictionalized and has little relationship to reality. George Hodel never knew Elizabeth Short and never killed anyone. Everything that the Hodel family claims about him is a long-running scam to sell books and get interviews. And someone else responds to that being like, "Hi Larry," who's the original poster. "You're doing good work dispelling the myths around Elizabeth Short and Steve Hodel. I watch your channel and I'm looking forward to your book."
Wait, that person's selling a book?
Apparently.
So wait, what are we supposed to make of that?
There was a massive, the first block of text is the review. I read the bit that was relevant to us.
What do you think?
The original bit.
Do you think we're being played?
I'm going to read some more, okay? Because there was a lot of this. I didn't listen to the podcast, but I read Hodel's book. He makes some huge leaps to connect his dad to the case. And if I remember correctly, also seems to think his dad was the Zodiac. It's been a while since I read it, but I do remember rolling my eyes a lot. Someone else, Hodel is a fraud for sure. That book was wacky for sure. He's oddly excited to blame it on his dad. It reminded me of that guy that claims his grandfather, H.H. Holmes, was also Jack the Ripper. They're downright gleeful. That seems to be the general consensus once more stuff about the family came out.
Okay. I did actually think so. Steve Hodel, who was the son of George, who was the former cop who wrote a book about this and was heavily featured in this podcast. I did think that some of the things that he presented felt a little thin or sort of circumspect, but it also seemed like it was balanced with some things that seemed pretty convincing, pretty damning.
I felt like they were like, well, this didn't work, but this thing worked. That's how I felt anyway. Other people, it really is a dark and twisted story. I just felt so bad for Tamar, and the Black Dahlia connection is intriguing, but I'm not sold that he did it. Someone else, it's a great podcast that presents a good argument for who the actual murderer is by the family of said murderer. Well worth the listen, but it can get rough with graphic discussion about child sexual abuse, so if that bothers you, proceed with caution.
That's pretty fair.
Also, I'm like, who does that not bother? But anyway,
Sure.
Absolutely loved Root of Evil. This podcast is a hard listen, very triggering for anyone who has experienced family abuse. But damn, is there a lot of amazing info. Yes, very hard listen. But there is a lot of amazing information. And I felt like a lot of the bugging of a house in 49, 50?
Yeah.
I didn't even know they did that. The fact that they arrested him and then like broke into his house, but then had to bug, but like hardwired the bug to like a local thing. Yeah. I was like, that's wild.
Yeah.
Mr. House 38 says, I hated is in italics. I hated this podcast. It seemed like nothing properly links to anything else. I gave up after 5 or 6 episodes because I was completely lost about how this had anything to do with Black Dahlia. I found it very frustrating, honestly. And then Il Biscotti 5386 responds with, George Hodel was a suspect in her murder.
I love that.
How does this relate? This is how it relates.
I do think on that note, though, I kind of think that the way we approach these, where we listen to one, stop, talk about it, and then go back and listen to the rest, kind of served this podcast well, in that we kind of took that space to talk about this outside of the Black Dahlia murder, knowing that was coming. But I feel like I got more invested in the Tamar and Fauna story than maybe I would have if I came to it, listened to episode 1, I was like, when are they going to get to the Black Dahlia murder? And then that's in episode 2. And then it kind of goes back to talking about the family and Tamar. And yeah, maybe that would have bothered me more, but it is also true. Like, he was a main suspect. So therefore, if it's about him and his family, then that seems pretty relevant.
I call a little bit of BS on all of this though, because the name of the podcast is Root of Evil, the true story of the Hodel family and the Black Dahlia. Presumably, Root of Evil is to do with the family tree.
Sure.
The true story of the Hodel family. So it's about the Hodel family. Like, that is the main crux of this, is basically the impact of him. The reason he is not in the title The reason it's not the Black Dahlia murder is because the Black Dahlia murder has a connection, but it also, the father, Tamara's father, had a huge impact on generations. And they're talking about that. He had an impact on every victim he came across, whether it was daughter, granddaughter, Elizabeth Short, if he's ever convicted, allegedly, whatever. You know? It's about how it spreads. It's also about the systematic issues that have spread. Because if one person turns a blind eye, it's like the case in France. Gilles Pellicot. Oh, and she goes by a different name now.
But can I jump back to something you said before?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right to focus on the structure of the title of the podcast. Because you're right, Black Dahlia is in the title, but it's buried in the title. And it's definitely like the emphasis is fully on the family story. And that's what the podcast does. I think the podcast is true to the title. But I also think if someone said, hey, here's what's a big Black Dahlia podcast, this is also that. But it's first and foremost about this family. But that's what I expected it to be. That's what I expected it based off the title, off the description. It's these two women.
Oh, yeah, they didn't mislead it.
Yeah, they're looking into their family story. They're looking into their mother, their grandmother, and their great-grandfather. But you have to go all the way back those 3 generations to get to the Black Dahlia. And she is important, but she is also tangential to the family story.
It's wild. There was just a lot of feelings about it. A lot of people were saying, so many people saying they're glad they recommended it. One person saying, I'm so glad I listened to it before it became famously panned for being apparently very embellished and a stretch because it's an all-time favourite.
Was it
This is what Life of Caterpillar says. And then banana, like as in B-A-N-N-A-N-A. Anyway, says, I binged this one in a few days right after it came out. It was a great story and thoroughly engaging. Plays fast and loose with reality and truth, but if you know that going in, then have a good time with it. Some of these reviews, I'm like, lads, I don't know, was I having a good time with any of this?
Did you know they let anyone write anything on the internet?
Yeah, it turns out. Would I recommend this? Yes, I would say.
Strong content warning.
No, I'm asterisking my yes. Yes, but I would recommend someone to listen to episode 1, our recap. And then 4, which my notes on 4 are, it's a reprieve because we hear of a police officer or investigator telling us about loads of cases he solved, like murder cases he solves.
I was actually wondering what episodes other than 1 aren't significantly upsetting to listen to.
But then it went into like the surrealist stuff.
Ooh, yeah.
And I was like, oh God, Art. And then episode 5 is just Jesus fucking Christ again. JFC again was that.
Okay, so.
Episode 6, I think I would listen to.
Yeah, this was one about bugging the house, the kind of police investigation.
Yeah, and definitely episode 8. Episode 8
sure.
was the last one.
Very powerful. I will say, I would recommend this. I feel like I would recommend it with a strong content warning.
I was just going to say, did you not recommend it the other day?
What do you mean?
We were just out for dinner yesterday with like 3 other people, and both of us were like, absolutely don't listen to this.
Oh, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who has any type of like apprehension about whether graphic violence or child abuse or like you got to know what the content is you're getting into. But I think if you're interested in true crime, and I do think this is also just from like this family story, I think this was really fascinating and powerful, but it's deeply upsetting. Just like, know your audience. There's lots of people I would steer away from listening to this. But there's lots of people, lots of our fans who I think probably this is a a well put together podcast.
Yeah.
Before we go, just a reminder, let us know your thoughts. You can leave any comment you want on the internet, and that includes as a comment on Spotify, on Apple, about our show. And we appreciate it. Whatever you'd like to share, we want to hear it. Also, while you're there, be sure to give us a rating, one of those 5-star ratings. We do really appreciate that. That helps other people find the show, helps us to grow our audience. And another way you can do that is to tell a friend, or tell friends, plural. Friends, all the people that you know, let them know about our show. Spread the word. Thank you.
All right, Jeff. Joseph O'Callaghan, 2005, becomes the youngest person ever to enter what?
The youngest person to...
It has to be crime related, remember, because this is a crime.
Okay, steal a truckload of Guinness.
That was really stereotypical of you. Like, you just like...
I didn't say potatoes or Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms. We don't have Lucky Charms in Ireland. Like, they don't exist. We are the Lucky Charms.
The most Irish thing I knew as a child.
Well, it was not. It was fake. It was all a mirage. He actually became the youngest person ever to go into witness protection in Ireland. He helped convict 2 drug-dealing gangsters for murder. We're going to hear about his extraordinary life story in his own words for the first time. That's The Witness in His Own Words by Yellow Path Productions.
That's on the next So Much Crime.
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.